This is Clark Kent from the Predatory Lending Network, out with the news that the Beast wildfire in Canada is the costliest disaster in history of over $7 billion. What do you make of this?
Fires are very bright, and the dark one, Cthulhu, is dark. Put them together, he slays the beast.
Now, over 100,000 people had to be evacuated from their homes. What do you make of that?
Mass migration? Canada takes them in, you know. They've got to be able to find a place for them with the refugees. They're good like that.
Now, insurance companies are helping to cover this, but it may be too much for them to handle. What do you think of that?
They should say please to the government.
The Canadian government.
Please, eh? They're good at please. They're very polite.
1/3 of Canada's oil fields are closed, and 1/3 of Canada's oil fields are closed. What does this mean for Canada and the rest of the world?
You know, who pays attention to Canada? It's good for them. PR, right? Mm-hmm. Right, PR.
Yeah. So in closing, is there any last minute things you'd like to say?
It's all shiny, Captain.
So in closing, this is Clark Kent from the Predatory Lending Network, signing out. This is Clark Kent from the Predatory Lending Network, out with the news of the Beast wildfire in Canada is now the costliest. This is Clark Kent from the Predatory Lending Network, out with the news that the Beast wildfire is the costliest disaster in history of over $7 billion. What do you make of this?
Unfortunately, I do have to apologize for our inappropriate field testing. Well, I really shouldn't say the name of my company, but we are making reprimands to the wildfire and the reserves and to the local populace in their great and tragic loss. I do apologize on behalf of the company.
Now, there's 100,000 people who had to be evacuated from their homes. What do you have to say about that?
We're glad we actually got to them in time. The etheric emissions were hasty in our projections in their acceleration, but unfortunately, we couldn't get everyone on time.
Okay, now insurance companies are helping, but may not be able to cover all the cost. What do you think of that?
It's going to be a big dent out of my pocket. That's what that's going to be.
Now, 1/3 of Canadian oil fields are closed. Now, what does this mean for Canada and the rest of the world?
Well, with only 1/3, they should only be able to produce, a couple of 1,000-ton barrels? It shouldn't affect much in this long run, but in 2 or 3 years, yes, there might be a sharp rise in gas prices, a small increase of people staying at home and not wanting to travel. But other than that, there shouldn't be too much deficit.
So in closing, is there any last minute things you'd like to say?
Try to avoid any three-eyed bears or four-armed squirrels in the next... Oh, there goes the 2:35 delivery. In the next, 5 years. We'll have everything cleared up by then, hopefully.
So in closing, this is Clark Kent on the Predatory Lending Network saying live long and prosper. Okay, this is Clark Kent from the Predatory Lending Network, out with the news that the Beast wildfire in Canada is now the costliest disaster in history of over $7 billion. What do you make of this?
Well, we had one of our low-flying airships probably touch it off. The pine trees have gotten really dry this year, and unfortunately sometimes the surrounding landscape will suffer a little bit for testing, but ultimately, you know, we've got to learn how to make our airships better, stronger, and faster.
Now, over 100,000 people had to be evacuated from their homes. What do you make of this?
You know, we always do our best to provide shelter and funding whenever an accident occurs. So it's terrible, but we're doing everything possible to help them be comfortable and get back to their homes as soon as possible.
I'm just worried about the mic unplugging. Insurance companies are helping, but it may not be enough for them. Insurance companies are helping, but it may be too much for them to cover the cost. What do you think of that?
Insurance companies are in the business of helping where they can, but they're also, you know, not going to spend on things that don't make sense. So in this case, it's really humanitarian need above and beyond the insurance companies, and we'd really like to see the government step in and give some more financial support.
Now, 1/3 of Canadian oil fields are closed due to this. Now, what does this mean for Canada and the rest of the world?
Unfortunately, that the sale of local drilled oil will have to be going down. That means we have to export, or rather import more, and that will affect economies worldwide, especially here locally in the U.S.
So in closing, is there any last minute things you'd like to say?
Look for the Star Wars Steampunk Universe. We are a charity group, #SWSU.
So in closing, this is Clark Kent from the Predatory Lending Network saying live long and prosper. This is Clark Kent from the Predatory Lending Network out with the news of the Beast wildfire in Canada is now the costliest disaster in history at over $7 billion. What do you make of this?
Well, it's terrible. I lived in Northern California and I've been through fires several times up there, and to have one this size is just devastating.
Now, over 100,000 people had to be evacuated from their homes. What do you make of this?
Oh, that's tough. Where are you going to put them? You know, a lot of people are going to be homeless. You know, and I just don't know what to think about that one.
Now, insurance companies are helping, but it may be too much for them to cover all the cost. What do you make of this?
Well, the society should come up with it. You know, make it right. You know, we got to rebuild. It's society. It's like it's everybody's problem. You know.
Okay, now 1/3 of Canadian oil fields are closed down. What does this mean for Canada and the rest of the world?
Oh, a lot higher prices in gas. It makes it hard to travel.
So in closing, is there any last minute things you'd like to say?
Just that I hope that everybody's doing okay up there, and that we can get a hold of this fire as soon as possible.
So in closing, this is Clark Kent from the Predatory Lending Network saying live long and prosper.